part of that event was people breaking off as partners and doing some work on themselves, right? And we had an odd number, and being the teacher, I just went with this one person. And they said to me that I was the most compassionate person that they'd ever met. And I thought, oh, that's lovely that they would say that about me. And I thought in the moment, well, I had never thought of myself as compassionate. And again, I'm in my 40s when this happened. And I say it probably took me another 10 or 15 years before I could recognize what it was they were talking about. And
Yes.
it was that I feel like it was partly due to being a good listener, listening to them and not being judgmental for whatever
Yes.
they said, having
Yes.
compassion for their thoughts and their feelings without judgment. And then at that point, I was like, okay, I can accept that, because I've never thought of myself as a very judgmental person, although it happens from time to time. And sometimes
Human nature.
judgment is good, because that's the only way we can discern what is right for us and what isn't. We have to kind of judge it, right? But
Yeah.
that was the first experience, like with compassion, the word compassion, that I ever had.
I had a little bit different. So for people who don't know, and I'm not sure you know, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
So the first recollection I remember hearing the word compassion was related to Christ. In school, when we did our, because you had religion in the morning. That was one of our
Mhm.
classes. From the time you were in first grade, they didn't do kindergarten where I was. So from the time I was in first grade, we had religion every day. And I remember hearing, probably I was maybe first grade, probably six, where I heard about the compassion of Christ. I know that I understood the love, but I understood no matter what, God accepted us and Jesus accepted us. But because at that point, that's what I knew in my mind. I didn't know consciousness and all that good stuff. But then it's, as I became like as a teenager and probably young adult into my early 20s, then you start hearing more of those abstract concepts where, I became a nurse. So you definitely hear compassion related to nursing.
Mhm.
You have to be compassionate. You want to provide compassionate healthcare. But even then, I'm not really sure I understood it as helping others, of even so much as self-sacrifice to care for others. That
Mm.
was a big theme in my life,
Yeah.
for sure. Yes, those early years of my life, most definitely. I understood compassion to be that. If you're compassionate, you give and you give. You're a good listener, because I've always been a good listener. No surprise there. But I would just give and give and give and give, because I didn't understand energy balance and how when you give,
Right.
you need to be able to accept too.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't
Or
get
else
that
you get,
either.
see, there should be a class. You get empty if you don't hold space.
Mhm.
And it really wasn't, again, everything kind of hit in my late 30s, early 40s, where I had this huge awakening. And I recognized what compassion actually was. And it relates to that empathy. It relates to holding space. It relates to all those things that we talk about now, where I never really got the concept until I stood in that space and practiced it. Why
Yeah.
is it important? You hit it on the head to me. Non-judgment, what people don't recognize is judgment is the opposite of love. When we sit in judgment of somebody, it is the opposite of love. We're telling them and we're telling ourselves that we're not good enough for love.
Hmm.
So, and that is a hard concept to swallow. That took me a while to swallow it, but I was like, actually, that's exactly what it feels like when I judge somebody or I am judged. It felt like the opposite of love.
I would often say to myself, what would Jesus do?
Yep.
you know, and would Jesus be in a state of compassion, or would he be in judgment, or, and it's always compassion, right? It
Yes.
always brings you back to being compassionate for whatever anybody else is thinking or feeling or believing. And I think getting to the point where you understand that a belief is simply a thought that someone has thought over and over and over again, and it has become cemented into their subconscious as truth.
Yes.
Whether it is true or not doesn't matter.
Right.
because they've thought it long enough that they can't see anything other than that. And for them, it is true.
Yes.
If you can understand that concept, then you can have compassion for that person because they haven't had the space to embrace something bigger than the limiting belief that they are carrying with them.
Yes.
And so if you can recognize that, I think that brings you to a state of feeling compassion for another, recognizing that, and I hate to say it this way, but it's like, you poor thing that you haven't,
Sympathy versus empathy. Yes.
yeah, right.
Yes.
So
Different vibration.
yeah, but it happens. Like, it's like, oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Aw.
But when somebody is, angry about something, that they're so strong in their belief, and we're seeing that a lot in the country right now. We're seeing that people are lacking compassion, that they're holding so tightly to those beliefs that
Yes.
they're not even willing to listen to someone else's perspective on something. And there's no compassion in that. I usually use this analogy with people. It's like a pimple, and it's festering, and
Yes.
it's swelling, and it's getting really uncomfortable. And you just know that eventually it's going to pop, right? And
Oh
then you'll
yeah.
feel better. And that's where compassion comes in, right?
No.
But once the pimple is popped, then there's room. There's room
Yes.
for compassion. There's room for people to open their minds and think maybe a little bit differently. And even if you're so staunch on your beliefs that there's no way anybody's going to convince me differently, if you can open just enough room to hear someone else's perspective and understand, have compassion for them and understand why they believe what they believe.
A person who I very much respected, who was definitely integral in my awakening, she had given me a sheet called Just Like Me. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure many people have seen it. It's something that's circulated around for a number of years, but it's an exercise that I give people who are stuck, especially in victimhood, or so enraged in their own beliefs and anger that they just, my family or my significant other or my this, that, and or work or whatever it is. I give them this exercise to help them recognize the human in other people and find compassion. And so every time somebody triggers you, you say, oh my gosh, I can't stand when that person doesn't put the lid on the toothpaste, just like me. I can't stand when that person is late to work, just like me. And it helps them in that moment, snap them out of the, and wait a minute, have I ever been late for work before? Yeah, I have. So I can see where, have I been in that space? Absolutely. Maybe I will have a conversation with that person, but it takes the emotional charge out of it. In turn, people that have trouble seeing themselves in that compassionate light, because I do see a lot of that where people, they afford compassion to everybody else except themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Every time somebody does something, oh, Tonya is so loving, just like me. Tonya gives so much, just like me, to help them realize that compassion for themselves too. And I'll tell you what, I never expected when utilizing that tool that it would be so transforming for people to be able to sit in that space and recognize themselves or this source in other people and be able to have compassion to that because they recognize a little bit of themselves. I love that. I've used it myself. More times than I can count, especially when I get very emotionally charged, and I do. I'm a Cancer. I can pull back and I'm like, wait, have I ever turned out in front of somebody? Yeah, I have before. I get it, dude. I'm sorry. I'll let you in. Just taking that charge out of things. Is it that bad? No, it's not that bad. I'm going to get through this. In this moment in life, it's a very small thing. It's not going to end the world if I don't get the parking space that's closest.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, that to me has just been a way that for me to help draw out that emotion or step away from that for a second to recognize the human in people, to recognize source in people.
That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. That's a great way to think about that.